Hello, hi everyone. It's lovely to see you today here and online. My name's Liz. I'm the Senior Curator for West Cheshire Museums up in the Northwest. Interestingly, just linking to what Martha was saying, I'm going to be talking today about a project we've been working on for about 4 years now, which is using our archaeological collections to weave stories about our medieval city, some new, some revisited. Here are West Cheshire Museums. It's a local authority-run museum service of 4 very diverse sites, one of which is the Grosvenor Museum, the red up there, where I started my journey with West Cheshire Museums as Curator of Archaeology 12 years ago. I now work across all of the sites with all of the collections, so it's a busy job, but very enjoyable, and we do have some fantastic archaeological collections. So my talk today is going to focus not on the Romans for once, or Chester silver, but on our wonderful medieval artefacts and how, by working together with the University of Chester, we've been breathing new life into the story of our medieval city. And in fact, by the end of my talk, I hope you'll see it's not just the university we've been working with. We've roped in very many people, many partners to help us with this project. So this is our project. I didn't choose the title. It's not the most snappy, mobility of objects across boundaries 1000 to 1700. And we call it MOB for short, because that's a bit of a mouthful. It's a collaborative interdisciplinary project funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and its aim is to reconsider the history of material culture in the period set, and it's very much an ongoing project. We've reached the end of one phase, as you'll hear at the end of my talk, and we're about to embark on another. The project's being led by Associate Professor Catherine Wilson from the University of Chester and Associate Professor Leah Clark from the University of Oxford, who have been working in partnership with us at the Museum Service, using our collections as a resource. And it's called Mobility of Objects because Catherine, who is a medieval historian, and Leah, who is an art historian, are really interested in how objects moved around in this period, moved around cities, countries, in and out of spaces, moved with people or in chests, that sort of thing. And the whole project really came about because of the tile that you can see on your screen now. This is a 14th century tile excavated from the nave of Chester Cathedral in 1996. We call it the 3-hair tile for obvious reasons. There are 3 hairs there who are all sharing an ear in the centre, making this quite distinctive motif. And this really sparked the interest of Catherine and Leah because the design seems to have travelled a long way. It's found in the 6th century Buddhist cave temples in Dunhuang in China, and it slowly made its way along the Silk Road to Europe, then to southern Britain, where you can see it on bosses in churches, and then up to Chester, to our beautiful cathedral. So this was the starting point for the MOB project. I'm going to show you a picture of lovely Chester. So we do hold some really interesting archives and artefacts from this period, from the city. This is a plan of Chester in our collections by Braun and Hagenberg, showing the city in 1581. And it displays all of the main features of our medieval city. I think I've got a pointer on here. So you can see the walls, obviously. Here's Chester Castle, which no longer looks like that. There's the water tower, which has been built out into the River Dee to protect the port, which is here. There are the rows, which radiate out from the cross, our famous sort of 2-tier street system. And there's St. Werburgh's Abbey, which is now Chester Cathedral up here, St. John's Church, our first cathedral, a Saxon foundation, and a series of lesser medieval houses along this part of the city too. And we have artefacts from all of these sites. But they're not very widely used. We've got 2 archaeology galleries within the museum, one which details Roman archaeology, Roman life. The other is Roman death, which showcases our amazing, internationally important collection of Roman sculptured and inscribed stones. So although lots of people know about medieval Chester and people have researched it academically, we've not really done anything popular. We've not shared it with as wide an audience as we feel that we can. And the Mobility of Objects project gave us an opportunity to examine our medieval collections with other people, not just the belongings of the rich and named nobles, monarchs, but the goods used by everyday people in our city, and to put the objects themselves right at the centre of the research into how material culture transformed and changed society in this period. And I have to say that although the project really benefited our academic partners, it's been particularly interesting for us at the museum to understand more about our medieval collections. And over the last 5 years or so, the University of Chester historians and archaeologists have really tried to root their research into the city of Chester and demonstrate how the local history of our beautiful city is undeniably part of the rich and dynamic global picture. So there's this idea that Chester's a global and interconnected port, and it was something that we were really keen to see if our collections would support. So we couldn't include all of our medieval objects in this project. We narrowed down our selection to portable objects which would easily move around for the Mobility of Objects project. So you can see here the first selection of objects we made. So we've got keys, shoes, we have tiles, including the hair tile, pilgrim badges and devotional objects, and you can see in the centre there we're all looking at that lovely Armada chest which once belonged to the goldsmiths company in Chester. So this set of items we got out of the collection. We, within the museum service, had a good look at them, made sure that all of our data was up to date. And then we set about organising a series of workshops to investigate this resource. So, here we go. As I say, funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, we set up a research network. This brought together archaeologists, historians, art historians, conservators, digital humanists. Steve, you can see there who's leaning over the chest with me, is a natural historian. And these people came from all different sorts of institutions, both in this country and abroad. Our hope was that these workshops would allow academics to step outside the traditional frameworks and disciplines and provide a new means and structure for considering objects from our collections. So not to be confined by the traditional sort of periods, medieval and early modern, or their own disciplines and how they're used to examining objects. So we did set about breaking down a few sort of barriers there. And the network really took a really in-depth look at our selected medieval artefacts and discussed how they would have circulated across cultural, linguistic and geographical boundaries to question and reinterpret assumptions about the movement of objects. And one topic that came up time and again, it's interesting just from what Chris and Charlotte were saying, was about the lives of these objects, their stories, and how them individually and brought together can tell people about what was happening in the medieval city from a quite personal view, and how them being moved around created this whole social history. So that was something that was really interesting to investigate and interpret. So I'm really sorry I can't go into lots of detail about this early stage of the project in the time allowed here, but good news, if you want to know more, the first port of call is our Mobility of Objects website, where you can find out more about all of the artefacts we've been looking at. Also on the Open Arts Archive, hosted kindly by the Open University, there's a series of really good videos where we all discuss the objects and them moving around and what the network feels about them. And hot off the press, published last week, edited by Catherine and Leah, is the papers from a conference that we held with the network, the Mobility of Objects Cross Boundaries volume there, which is available to purchase now. So the workshops from this early phase of the project went really well. There was lots of cross-discipline collaboration. The mob volume was being published, but we didn't want it to all end there. We wanted to share this more widely and do more work with these collections. So the network applied for some Arts and Humanities Research Council follow-on funding, and this has allowed us to undertake additional educational outreach and enrichment work, taking our collections, our brilliant resource, into new audiences, or to share them with new audiences. So I'll just detail some of that now. The funding has allowed us to work in collaboration with another department of the University of Chester, this time the PGCE Teacher Training Education Departments. And we worked with them to train their student teachers and their newly qualified teachers, their NQTs, to teach with objects. You might think this is something they taught anyway, but it really surprised me that how reluctant many of the NQTs were to work with historic artefacts as opposed to written source material, which they felt much more comfortable with. So student teachers came into the museum, they examined artefacts, we all prepared the workshops together to take out into schools. First they went out into 5 secondary schools across North Wales and Cheshire, where around 400 pupils took part in our handling sessions with objects from the collection. And they produced creative writing or artistic responses to the objects. I went out with all of the sessions. I felt they were really, really great. All of the teachers and pupils were very engaged. I particularly remember one history teacher from a secondary school on the Wirral, and she taught the development class where there were young people who were struggling with basic literacy, and they just switched off when they were presented with historic source material. They couldn't read a document in English, typed up in English, let alone one written in the medieval period. But they really came alive with their discussions about medieval shoes, what it would have felt like to wear them, who might have worn the pilgrim badges and why, what keys could have opened. Again, these life stories of objects that really struck a chord with them. And I was particularly pleased with this part of the project because we're well aware as museum archaeologists, the power that original objects have in telling stories. But it was great to see that reinforced and embedded in teaching practice with this new raft of young teachers who are now out teaching in schools and fully engaged with the museum and understand what a great resource it is. So we went a bit further. We took the same sessions out into primary schools. You can see here some of their responses. You might not be able to see very clearly from the side, but there are some artistic drawings. There's a little key in the middle section which said this is the key for Chester Castle. So some great imaginative writing. Although they look like hamburgers in this picture, there are some chests that are being opened by a medieval person with their key. And we had some really massive long texts about pilgrims who had travelled all over the world and what it meant for their badges, which the other two ones are about. So it was a really worthwhile part of the project, and something that we're looking to build on now as well. Finally, this follow-on funding, we worked with a number of well-established, very experienced local primary and secondary school teachers as well, to create resources to help them devise their own sessions in class to investigate real historic artefacts and our medieval city. And these have taken the quite traditional form of loan boxes. These are some teachers' workshops that we held in the Grosvenor Museum. You can see from the different sort of status of mask wearing in the pictures that this all took place in and out of lockdown. We started in 2018 and we're just rounding up this first phase of the project this weekend. So, this was all done with greatest of goodwill with all of these people who came to help the project around, quite a difficult set of situations within schools. So we're very grateful to all of them. And yes, these are our loan boxes, which we've developed with these local primary and secondary school teachers. You can see there's 5 there available. They have tended to focus on the secondary curriculum because there's lots of Middle Ages and medieval topics there. But you can see everyday life, trade, religious and spiritual journeys and places, religious studies, and then we've got a primary curriculum box, which is mainly because the Middle Ages isn't on the primary curriculum. We have sort of linked that to our local area. Lots of schools study their local area. So primary schools in Cheshire West are using that box to have a look at what was happening in Cheshire in the medieval period, using our real objects. And these are some of the resources that the teachers helped us devise. It was really great having their experience and expertise because, you know, we have a brilliant learning team in the museum as well. But really hearing from the teachers what would help them teach in class has helped us deliver something that's very focused on what is needed at the moment in primary and secondary schools. So these sheets come with the box of our objects, just very simple things like handling session questions, you know, what does it feel like when you touch it, what do you think it's made of, who do you think it belonged to pick out these stories, and then some lesson plans and some photocopyable resources too. Now, it wasn't part of our original project plan or the follow-on funding project plan, but we realised that we've been talking to academics, professionals, teachers, students, pupils, but we should also try and engage with the public, both museum visitors and non-visitors. And we were really lucky to be able to use the very enthusiastic and approachable raft of MA history students from Chester University to help us run a series of sort of public sessions. I don't want to call them consultation sessions. Basically, we just took objects out into unusual spots, sprung ourselves on people who weren't expecting to see us there and talked to them about the objects, what they liked about them, what they thought about them, what they wanted to see more of. So you can see the students here in Chester Cathedral Chapter House. At the top there, they're up in the Garrett Theatre in Story House, which is our local cultural centre. We also went to the Forum Shopping Centre and the Grosvenor Shopping Centre and Chester Market, and just popped up all over the place. You won't be able to see the comments on the board, I don't think, but it was widely well received. A lot of the quotes that we had back talked about the objects and the way that we talk to visitors about them, helping them to connect them to the period and historical aspects of the city. And just so we were covering absolutely all bases, you can leave online feedback as well. So we were trying to gather all of this information. What we did with this information, well, we reviewed it obviously, and we discovered from the feedback that people really wanted to immerse themselves, I don't really like that word, but they did say that a lot, immerse themselves in the medieval city, to see and feel what it was like to walk around and use the objects for themselves. By this point, we didn't have much budget left, but we were very lucky to be able to employ a local digital designer who was called Martin Moss, his company Dextra Visual. Martin is a very thorough researcher and dedicated to his art as well as to the integrity of our collections. And with him, we were able to develop a short film charting the journey of some of the objects which we've been examining or the spaces in which they were moving in and out of. I'll show you this in just a minute. But finally, we decided to produce an exhibition which was called Medieval Chester Retold. And it was on display at the Grosvenor Museum and is currently on display until the end of this weekend at Chester Cathedral in the Chapter House. I'll just show you some slides now. Now, we don't actually have exhibition budgets with West Cheshire Museums. Most of our exhibitions are externally funded, so the Arts and Humanities Research Council follow-on funding paid for this exhibition for most of it. And we couldn't build a complete set of medieval Chester, which is what I think people wanted, some sort of Jorvik experience. But we did try and give a little nod, a little feel of walking around the city, I hope. So you can see that at the beginning of the exhibition, you walked through a gate and along a medieval street, which was built by our technicians in the museum. We had on display much more of our medieval artefacts, so we can see here shoes, found in the city ditches and on Lower Bridge Street where our tanneries were. We recreated little parts of medieval city, so this is a tiled floor using some of the designs of tiles that we found around the city. It's only a small section because we were very aware that we were moving to Chester Cathedral and it was so heavy, just this little section we couldn't do anymore. But it was useful in the exhibition because we did have replica shoes people could try on, and quite frequently we would watch on CCTV as people were walking up and down in their medieval shoes on the tiles, listening to what it sounded like. It was quite joyous. We introduced more objects into the exhibition as well, so you can see here a section of medieval sort of domestic setting with some pots, and there's some keys in that section too. And lots of interactive things. People were telling us they wanted to just feel things and touch things, pick them up and smell them, that sort of thing. So you can see here some of our interactive elements. We've got replica pilgrim badges and coins. We had a St. Werburgh's jigsaw. We had a little reading area, dressing up. I think my next slide, yeah, we've got some medieval pilgrims there dressing up. But it was a real fun exhibition. People enjoyed coming to have a look at the artefacts and to have some fun as well. And I mentioned it was moving to Chester Cathedral. Here it is on display in the lovely chapter house until the 18th. So, I can play you the video now if that's okay. It is quite, it's 4 minutes long, the video, so just sit back and relax, let it ease you into tea break. you. Thanks. So that was by far the most popular method of interpretation in our exhibition. It was, we showed it in 2 parts, this video by Dextra Visual, and the first part where the pilgrims arriving at the water tower, obviously meant to convey the mobility of objects into the city, and then the religious aspects of the exhibition, which we showed at St. John's Church. We showed those 2 different videos in different parts, but we had lots of great comments from visitors about how much they enjoyed seeing that, and it did help them imagine what the medieval city was like, but then they were standing right next to the objects which were shown in the video as well. So we were really pleased with that aspect too, and I'm sure we'll be using it again. Okay, this is my last slide. So we are, as it said, this is a very beautifully, a very beautifully decorated BT box. They've been appearing around the city this summer as part of an arts initiative, but we're not just Romans. Actually, on the far side of it, you can't see it from here, I don't have a picture, but there's a beautiful drawing of Ethelflaed as well, and it says, don't forget Ethelflaed. There's a lot to the city of Chester, and we're really pleased that we're being able to bring out this particular story, or these stories at the moment. And though we're at the end of this phase of the MOD project, working together with a variety of partners to interpret and share our medieval collections, we're planning to shout about them a lot more in the near future. We've got a major funding application in at the moment to extend our work in all areas of the MOD project, to consolidate and build on what we've already done and advance our understanding and increase the use of our medieval collections in the future. Thank you.